I didn't know what I was signing up for. Not really. The job description was vague. Intentionally vague, I think. Facility Technician Level 1. It said. Must be comfortable with high-security environments, have flexible moral adaptability, and a strong stomach. I figured it was some military subcontractor. Maybe private sector prison work, worst case. But I needed a job. Rent was overdue. Credit cards were maxed out. So I said yes. They flew me out blindfolded. That should have been my first red flag. The man who met me at the airport never told me his name, only referred to himself as escort agent. We didn't speak the entire drive. The windows of the car were blacked out. No GPS, no phone signal. Just winding roads and thick silence. When we arrived, the compound looked like a hydroelectric dam or a deep-sea naval bunker. Concrete, steel, and absolute sterility. The front had no signage. Just a keypad, a retinal scanner, and a gate that slid open without a sound. Inside, they took my clothes. Burned them, actually. Everything I brought was either destroyed or stored somewhere I'd never see again. They gave me a gray uniform with no name tag, no rank, just a patch that said, Support Division. That's what I was now, support. They didn't call it the SCP Foundation until I was officially cleared. And by cleared, I mean drugged, interrogated, memory scraped, and then threatened. I signed something probably under duress, but honestly, I barely remember. All I know is, the day I arrived, I stopped being a normal person. I became one of them, a ghost working in the shadows of the world. On my third day, they told me I was scheduled for feeding duty. Feeding what? No one answered. They just handed me a plastic clipboard, a cart with 4 vacuum-sealed meat packs, and a lanyard with 3 clearance cards. Each card was a different color. Red, orange, and white. You'll need these, the supervisor said without emotion. My hands were already sweating. The elevator ride down was long. Longer than should be physically possible. I watched the floor numbers descend past -30, then 40, 50. When it finally stopped, the air smelled different. Metallic, like blood and old machinery. I passed through 3 security doors. The guards didn't look at me. One of them was trembling. That made it worse. The first containment cell was labeled SCP-999. I exhaled, relieved. I'd heard whispers about this one. Harmless, even helpful. A blob of orange goo with the emotional equivalent of a golden retriever. I entered, placed the meat in its dispenser tray, and stood back. The door hissed shut behind me. Then I heard a squelching sound. Not from the tray, from the ceiling. That's when I realized I was in the wrong cell. The label on the outer door had been scratched. Someone had deliberately relabeled the section. The creature that dropped down from the dark corner didn't match anything I'd seen in the training manual. It wasn't goo. It had bones. Too many of them. And its eyes, they weren't even on its face. They were floating above its head, rotating slowly like satellites. I froze. The meat pack slid from my hands. The creature didn't move toward it. It moved toward me. There was no sound, not even footsteps. It just glided. Couldn't scream. My voice caught in my throat. Then, at the last moment, a loud buzz went off. A speaker above me blared. Specimen return order initiated. Please vacate immediately. A wall opened to my left and the thing, whatever it was, darted into the darkness like it was being summoned. I staggered backward, nearly vomiting. Back in the hallway, the guard outside looked at me and said, "They do that sometimes. Hazing the new guys. Don't take it personal." I didn't know whether to laugh or punch him. That was my introduction. Since then, I've fed at least 6 different SCPs, each more bizarre than the last. Some eat through osmosis. Some prefer warm food. One refused to eat unless I sang to it in Latin. Another one didn't eat at all. It just watched me as if I were the meal and they were just waiting. You're probably wondering why I'm still here. Why not quit? Why not escape? Here's the truth. You can't leave. The Foundation doesn't let you walk away. Once you're in, you're part of the system. You vanish from public databases. Your name gets reassigned to another file. Birth certificate deleted. Social media scrubbed. Even your memories, if they want, can be edited. You don't work for the foundation. You belong to it. The thing about working here is that you stop asking questions. You learn fast that curiosity is punished. Maybe not with words, not with write-ups or lectures, but with assignments. And some of those assignments, well, they're designed to erase the part of you that wants to know more. For instance, after my incident with the mislabeled containment cell, I was given something called feeding rotation theta. Sounds harmless, right? Like some scheduled maintenance duty. Except theta meant night shift, level for access, and something they never explained. A mandatory blood draw before every run. They didn't tell me what the blood was used for, just that it was part of the protocol. That's all they ever say. Protocol. The word has no meaning here, just an implied threat. That night, I descended deeper than ever before. Level -89. Most employees never go beyond -40. Some of the older guards joked that anything lower than -70 was God's basement. I thought they were kidding. They weren't. I entered a chamber that looked less like a cell and more like a chapel, if that chapel had been designed by a madman. Symbols were etched into every surface. Ceiling, floor, even the backs of the steel benches bolted to the walls. The lights were dim and red, not out of atmosphere but necessity. Apparently, white light agitated the entity. That's what the placard said, right above a speaker that repeated the same line every few minutes. Remain still. Do not speak. Do not offer more than what was requested. In the center was a cube. Black, matte, humming softly, pulsed like a heartbeat. I placed the small vial of my own blood on the tray and backed away. Far away. The hum grew louder. And then, it spoke. Not in English. Not in words. The sound didn't come through the air. It came through my teeth, like vibrations in my skull. I didn't understand what it said, but I felt it, like dread curling up from my spine into my brain. It collapsed. When I woke up, the tray was empty, the cube was silent, and there were 4 new scratches on the inside of my forearm. Parallel, surgical, not deep enough to bleed, but precise enough to terrify. I asked what that SCP was. My handler just stared at me and said, "There is no SCP in that cell." And that was the end of it. Some of us keep journals. We're not supposed to, but we do. We write in code, in hidden margins, in the backs of ration packets. We don't write to remember, we write because we're forgetting. It's like something about being near them, the SCPs, begins to decay your timeline. One day you're sure you fed 096, then suddenly it was 173, and someone insists 096 was moved months ago. You start questioning if it ever happened. There's a janitor named Ellis. He's been here for decades, longer than anyone. He has no rank, no clear purpose, just mops, wipes, and hums. But everyone respects Ellis, even Site Command. And one night, after a long shift, I caught him staring at the reinforced glass outside SCP-100 and SIXS Containment. I asked him, "Do you ever get used to this?" He didn't look at me. He just said, "No, but you stop waking up screaming. You just wake up quiet." That's when I realized something had changed in me. I hadn't dreamed in weeks. Sometimes the SCPs aren't the worst part. Sometimes it's the other staff. There are people here who enjoy it too much, who treat the containment breaches like games, who laugh when D-class don't make it back from testing. They walk these halls like gods, protected by clearance, untouchable by guilt. They assign people like me to feeding rounds, not because they need the help, but because they want to see what we'll do. Who'll break? Who'll snap? Who'll join them? They offered me a promotion last week. Level 2. Better housing. Fewer shifts. But there was a catch. I had to assist in a moral compliance experiment. I said no. 2 hours later, I found my locker emptied. My bed moved. My lunch privileges suspended for unauthorized caffeine access. That's how they punish you here, by reminding you they own every second of your day. And still, I stay. Because as horrible as it is, this place is protecting the world. I know that now. I've seen what's locked in those cells. If even one of them got out, if 682 ever breached long enough to adapt, if 610 found an airport, if 055 ever stopped being forgotten. Humanity would end. Just like that. And so we keep feeding the monsters. Because they're not the real threat. We are. There are 3 kinds of alarms in the Foundation. The first is yellow, containment anomaly, usually minor. A flickering light, a camera glitch, maybe an SCP displaying atypical behavior. Everyone keeps working, maybe slows down a bit, but nothing changes. The second is orange. A serious breach or internal emergency. At orange, the compound seals off. Doors lock. Teams mobilize. Your job, no matter what you're doing, is to freeze in place until told otherwise. Movement during orange gets you tagged as a threat. Then there's red. Red doesn't have a siren. Red is a silence so deep it pushes against your skull. When red hits, every door in the lower levels slams shut like coffins. Power gets rerouted. And most terrifying of all, no instructions follow. You just wait. It happened on my 67th day. I remember it because I had just finished feeding SCP-131, the little-eye creatures that follow you around like puppies. They're harmless, kind even. They'd grown attached to me. Whenever I walked into their chamber, they'd swirl around my legs, blinking in sync. That day, as I left the room, I noticed they weren't following me like usual. They stood still, watching the hallway. Then, all at once, they backed into the corner and shut their eyes. And that's when the lights turned red. The silence hit hard. Not even background hums, no ventilation buzz, nothing. Just me, the hallway, and the fact that 131s, creatures that never blink, were now refusing to look at what was coming. The PA didn't come on. No evacuation notice. No location markers. That's how you know it's real, when even the Foundation doesn't know what's wrong yet. I did what I was trained to do. Sat against the wall, hands visible, head low, and waited. 3 minutes passed. Then 5. Then footsteps. Not boots. Not guards. Bare feet. Wet. Slapping on the concrete with slow, deliberate pace. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The steps got louder. I couldn't tell from which direction. That's the worst part. Down here, sound travels like it's underwater. 1 second it's behind you, the next it's beside your ear. My skin crawled. Then the smell hit. It wasn't rot. Not like decay. It was memory. It was the smell of my childhood bedroom. The fear before a school fight. The silence before my father left for good. Every regret, every terror, every helpless second I'd ever known, poured into the air around me like invisible ink. I was suffocating on moments I hadn't thought about in years. Then it passed. The sound faded. The air cleared. And the red lights blinked back to yellow. I was still alive. But I wasn't the same. They found me 4 hours later in the same position. Knees locked. Fists white. Security logs showed no breach. Motion sensors recorded nothing. And yet I wasn't the only one. 6 employees across 3 levels had hallucinations. One of them bit through his own tongue. Another tried to walk into the incineration chamber while humming a lullaby. They called it a non-corporeal environmental event. I call it the thing that watches between walls. I've since read logs, declassified only for night shift feeders like me. There's a theory that not all SCPs are in containment. Some of them are the rooms, the architecture, the metal in the vents, the reflections in the floor when you're not looking directly at them. Not all of them have names. Not all of them want one. Ellis found me the next morning. He handed me a cup of coffee, sat beside me in the cold hallway, and said, "Some things here don't want blood. They want presence. They feed off our noticing." I asked him, "So how do we survive it?" He looked at me, slow, serious. "You learn how to disappear without leaving." Later that week, I returned to my rotation. Back to feeding duty. Back to trays of bone dust and ink-black fluid. Back to the quiet screams behind 3-inch glass and observation panels that flicker even when the cameras are off. I passed the containment zone for SCP-096, the shy guy. A new staff member was there, shaking, holding a tray and looking lost. I could tell from his lanyard green stripe, first week. He looked at me and whispered, "What happens if we mess up?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "You don't get to mess up. You just become the reason the next guy gets promoted." He didn't laugh. Neither did I. This place doesn't change you. It unmasks you. It finds the cracks in your mind and pushes gently, until something inside breaks, quietly, like a shelf falling in the night. And when you pick yourself up, you're no longer someone who feeds monsters. You're someone who understands them, because you've seen the other side, and it looked a lot like you. There are things you never forget in this place. The first time you hear a Class D scream and realize they're not just prisoners, they're tests with expiration dates. The first time you pass a mirror and see something behind you, only to turn around and find nothing. And the first time you feed an SCP that already knows your name, your past, your regrets, before you even step through the door. But nothing haunted me more than the final SCP they assigned me to. It wasn't listed in the main database. No file. No classification. No number. Not Euclid. Not Keter. Not even the blackbarred clearance levels. This one had no name, just a designation in bold red type. Project Reversal. There was no briefing. No overview. Just a 2-word instruction stamped on the access form. Do not look. That was it. Not even a feeding method was listed. No dietary notes. No warning signs. Just that one chilling directive. The escort team didn't speak as we descended. No banter. No acknowledgement of my presence. It felt more like a funeral procession than a personnel transport. I noticed their uniforms had no patches. No rank. Even their boots were soundless. Like they were designed to forget themselves. We stopped at a level I'd never seen before, lower than -120. The air was cold, dry, and yet somehow thick, as if it resisted being breathed. The hallway wasn't concrete like the others, but polished obsidian that reflected only shadows, not light. No signs, no codes, just a single black door, unmarked. One of the escorts handed me a plain gray tray. On it were 3 items. A piece of raw meat that looked wrong, too smooth, too red, almost artificial. A thin vial filled with a pale, glowing liquid, and a single feather, white, clean, untouched by dust or time. They said nothing, just pointed to the door and stepped back. I didn't ask questions. I'd stopped doing that a long time ago. The door opened on its own. No hiss, no sound. Just darkness. I stepped inside. There was no light, no walls, no ceiling I could see. The space seemed to go on forever, but not in distance. In depth. I felt like I was falling without moving. Like the ground beneath me didn't hold weight but memory. I walked 10 paces forward. Placed the tray on a platform I hadn't noticed was there until it touched it. Then I turned to leave. And that's when I heard it. It didn't speak. Not in words. Not even like the previous SCP that vibrated my skull. No, this one felt like me. The sound wasn't sound. It was recognition. A pulse of knowing. It remembered me. It remembered things I hadn't told anyone. The time I stole from my mother's purse when I was 12. The lie I told about my friend's injury. The time I could have helped someone, and walked away instead. It didn't threaten me. It reflected me. And I knew, without looking, that if I turned around, I would see myself. Not a mirror. Not a copy. But the true version of who I am beneath the face I show. And that sight alone would unmake me. I clenched my eyes shut. Stepped back slowly. Each movement felt like dragging myself away from gravity itself. When I crossed the threshold, the door sealed without a sound. And then everything changed. The next morning, my clearance was revoked. My badge replaced. My name removed from the shift logs. No one spoke to me. Not even Ellis. I was still working but no longer recognized. It was as if I'd been reset. Like my presence was tolerated, but not remembered. I asked the site commander why. He simply said, "Those who feed reversal don't come back the same. We keep them visible, but not involved." I didn't know what that meant, until I noticed something. My reflection stopped matching me. Not in any overt way, just subtle things. A blink delayed, a breath missed. Once, I turned away from a reflective surface and caught my reflection smiling when I wasn't. I stopped shaving, stopped sleeping, and the 131s The little eye creatures? They wouldn't come near me anymore. It's been 2 years now. I'm still here, still feeding, still walking these halls with trays of blood and bone and ash. But no one calls me by name. Sometimes I think I never had one. Sometimes I wonder if I ever really left that room. And if what came back wasn't me. Because now, every time I pass a reflective surface, I avoid looking. Just in case. Because I remember the one rule they gave me that day. And I finally understand it. Not looking is the only thing keeping me human.